What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I wanted to do another sit down and talk kind of video on WB Games and what I think they should be doing with the DC side of things. This is our little chance here to discuss how things have been going with their DC department and where things can go in the future. I did a video much like this last week with Sony, longer, more kind of laid back, sit back and talk kind of video. You guys seem to really like it, and I greatly appreciate it. So let's do it again, and let's do it with something I think maybe even more divisive, more messy. You could say maybe the live service element of PlayStation is messy, but wait until we talk about DC. No, what sucks about this is the unlimited potential, and I think that's what makes so many people rather upset about how everything has been handled. Is you think about, well, a Green Lantern game or a Green Arrow game to keep everything green, or Teen Titans. See, Teen Titans, when I think of DC properties, that it's unbelievable there hasn't been a game. I mean, Superman obviously is number one, I would assume, right? But I think Teen Titans is laughable that we did have a Teen Titans game way back in the day. I'm talking about modern day co-op. You could even do multiplayer. I know that's a little edgy and a little crazy, but there's so much you can do. And yes, gaming takes obviously a long time to make these games, and just the lack of anything, actually, I want to maybe use a different word, but there's been such bad, I guess, production, such bad distribution of these games and these ideas out to studios, making third-party deals. It's embarrassing. I honestly feel it's embarrassing. And I say this as somebody who has covered these games so much. I covered Arkham Knight way back in the beginning of the channel. Obviously, I covered Gotham Knights so much. I've covered Suicide Squad quite a bit, and I would honestly expect maybe even Wonder Woman. You see behind me, I think I'm going to cover Wonder Woman maybe more than any of those games. I can't freaking wait for this game, and maybe even part of the reason why I can't wait for this game is because of that exact thing. You're getting something just a little bit outside of the norm. I know people want them to go back to Batman, but just seeing like, oh, so a studio that normally doesn't make DC games, they're making a DC game. They're an incredibly talented studio, at Monolith, Nemesis System, all that stuff. Let's see what their Wonder Woman game is, and I would assume, or I would hope, that's going to be extremely good. But all right, well, we know a lot of their problems. I'm sure we're going to talk more about their problems as this video goes on, but what's the future look like? What do they need to do? They need to make more partnerships. You look at Disney and you look at Marvel, and what's a theme with the Iron Man game or the Black Panther game or Insomniac and their stuff, or Amy Hennig's game, right, doing the Captain America Black Panther thing. What's kind of the common theme there is, well, look, number one, they don't really have a studio themselves to like pump these things out, right? You have to make deals with these other publishers, with these developers to develop and make a game, okay? Now, DC, I guess in a lot of ways, it's somewhat similar, but it's also different where it's kind of locked under WB, right? So WB Games has the keys to all of this stuff, and up until this point, now the end of the story is probably a pretty okay one. It's a sign of possible like better things to come, right? But up until this point, we've really had a reluctancy to give any other studio besides their own these properties. So we've said it again, but I think it makes a lot of sense to kind of summarize it in a video like this. So what's it been like? Well, again, you have on the Marvel side, Disney side, it's been spread out. You have all these different developers underneath all these different publishers making all of these different superhero games for you. It's given them chances to fail. Like, you've had the Marvel's Avengers, and trust me, I don't want the Marvel's Avengers. I don't want DC to try their Marvel's Avengers, okay? I don't want that kind of stuff. But regardless, when you do so many different kinds of things, you're going to get that experimentation. You're going to get really bad ones. You're going to get really good ones. You're going to get ones that are kind of under the radar, and I would honestly say Midnight Suns, Marvel's Midnight Suns, a great game, a different kind of game, different genre that really only appeals to one kind of people, and I think you saw that with the sales. Midnight Suns didn't really sell well, and I actually hate to see stuff like that because hopefully that doesn't give them the wrong message, but that's what happens. That's what happens when you spread those things out. You get the Spider-Mans and eventually the Wolverines of the world. You get a couple Black Panther appearances now, right? And I guess Avengers, but then also the Amy Hennig game, also the EA game. They're doing, I would say, really well. And well, the reason I spend so much time talking about that is they're examples. They're things to kind of follow. You could look at the Star Wars approach where they did give everybody leniency, and they gave basically Star Wars to anybody who knocked at their door. In the mid 2000s, same thing. We got some really great ones, we got some under the radar ones, we got some really bad ones. Then they made it just EA. You saw what happened, and then they expanded right now. And what are we seeing? A little bit of diversity in the sense that you get more kind of cracks at it. And I think it's going to work out rather well. DC is still kind of living in that almost EA age of Star Wars where, and look, I think their teams are talented. I just talked about Monolith. I think Rocksteady is very talented. I think WB Montreal is talented. These are strong studios. However, well, number one, when you kind of make them do things that aren't really in their wheelhouse, that's an issue, right? So when you go more live service, you really need to back off that stuff. That stuff needs to stop, and I think it is stopping. I think they kind of realized it midway through production for Gotham Knights. I think Suicide Squad was kind of built with live service in mind, and they're kind of scrambling to, reevaluate. God, I hope Wonder Woman didn't start that way, right? Hopefully everything was okay by then, but they've had some issues there. You also just have the issue of lack of studios. That's the biggest thing. That's literally the issue here is when you have all these properties, and again, with Green Arrow, Green Lantern, give us a Flash game, give us a Superman game, give us an Aquaman game, give us Wonder Woman, which we're finally getting. There's so many possibilities, and all of them I do think would do well. Another thing with WB is almost the reluctancy to not rely on Batman. Now, it's also like a movie thing as well. I'll get into some of the movie equivalents of this as this video goes on as well, and because it's sad that, it's really, I think DC in general doesn't have like a grasp of what they want to do, and they haven't had a grasp for a long time. You see it with the movies, with just everything that's gone on, and in games it's kind of been that too. You struck gold with the Arkham franchise, and then you never really had a plan to like continue it out. Now, we know there were canceled games, W Montreal, I believe, right, with the Suicide Squad game, so they were working on it first. There's maybe rumors that there was a Superman thing going on at one of these, obviously the Damian Wayne game, so there were games that could have happened sooner, all canceled. But what the problem I think is just, again, lack of manpower, lack of studios. When you have so many ideas you can do, and then you got like two teams, that can do it, that's the biggest issue. Their biggest issue is reluctancy to kind of open the bank, open the vault, and say, well, we're not just going to give you this stuff for free. We want to make deals. We want to make money off of you guys making it, but let's do it. Let's start out. And again, the good story or the good ending to this tale, right, is with James Gunn and this new approach. Now, I'm not necessarily a fan of like the voice actors have to be like it's a synergy thing, right, where some voice people or some actors are going to be like that role across the board. Not for everything, and it's a case-by-case thing, right? But for every weakness that James Gunn brings in like that, the positive is they definitely seem more willing to, number one, just get more superhero games out into the world, okay? They got so many of them, we need to get more out. And then I would assume they'd also know, well, we can't do it by ourselves. When you got the WB Montreals of the world, and they're working, they got two different teams. So they're literally crafting two games at a time. Okay, great. When you got Rocksteady, which seemingly is only doing one thing at a time, well, right there, you limit yourself to 3 games, and they don't happen every year. You're looking at 3, 4, 5, maybe even longer than 5 years to make these games. And then, okay, well, you transition Monolith from, obviously they did the Middle-earth games, now they're doing one, but still, you will eventually run out. They don't have infinite teams. There are not that many of them. When you think of like the biggest teams the WB Games has, there's like 6 to 8 of them. Yes, there's more, but when you think of like the real big titans, when you think of the Traveler's Tales, right, the TT Games that does the Lego stuff, when you think of NetherRealm, well, they do the fighting stuff, and I mean, Injustice should be one of these DC things that happen, but obviously Mortal Kombat right now, you eventually run out. So what do? You gotta go out, and I can't imagine it wouldn't work. There has got to be studios out there and it's not even like you're pitching it to them. You're asking them to pitch it to you. You're asking for other studios. Okay, is there anybody that wants to do a Superman game? Raise your hand. Okay, well, let's study this team. Let's see what they've done in the past. Let's see if it's a good fit. Let them pitch us an idea and let us see if we can work it out. You work out the contract stuff. You're going to get some money from it. They're going to get some money from it. You might make one exclusive, like obviously you have the Spider-Man situation. You might not. You might make it exclusive towards Xbox or something else. Like, let's experiment a little bit. Let's get it out of this comfort zone, because ultimately the comfort zone is not working. It is. I will go back to the word embarrassing. It is embarrassing that from Arkham Knight we get Gotham Knights. Like that is the jump. You get Arkham Knight back in 2015. You get Gotham Knights where, and I guess Injustice, right, was present in between that time. But where are all these games? There should be a Superman game by now. The Wonder Woman game should have already, not necessarily that team, but like a Wonder Woman thing should have already been happening. You should have been working on deals with these other studios or these other developers to get these things out. Hopeful, and again, like, well, I want to say two things. Number one, like, you can look to the Marvels and the Star Wars, so really just Disney in general. You can look to them right now to say, oh, it works. Like giving it out to a variety, having like 6 Marvel games at the same time, but they're all different developers. That tends to work. Again, you might have one that undersells. You might have one that really messes or makes people really, really mad, say like a Marvel's Avengers, right? You're going to have those, but you're also going to have extremely good ones. So I would give them some slack that maybe like they're just learning, and obviously these people beat them to it, but I don't want to give them that much slack because, and this is a thing with the industry in general, none of them should really get off the hook all that much because I mentioned Star Wars in the mid-2000s. Like they already, Lucasfilm or LucasArts, right? They already did this. Like this was already something that you could look at as a study and say, we had dozens of Star Wars games over like a 5, 7, 8 year period, dozens of Star Wars games. And it was the exact same thing. Again, you had your bad ones, you had your good ones, you had your underrated gems, you had the ones that underperformed, you had your atrocities, but you also had some of the greatest Star Wars games of all time in all different genres. For every Empire at War, you had a Force Unleashed or all that, you know what I mean? And so we already did this. So like we should know, or these companies should know, oh yeah, maybe instead of like 2 studios that we have, and we have like 100 different properties, maybe instead of just like 2 teams working on it, maybe like we kind of go out and say, well, just because we don't own a studio doesn't mean we can't talk to them and see if maybe do they want to make an Aquaman game? Is there anybody out there that's well versed in water? Or then they also kind of do open world, like who would be a good fit? Let's go scout it out. Now again, I mentioned the movies. I think the biggest reason is just because they generally haven't had a good string of years. They generally probably just don't know what they want. I think that was the thing with the movies, with just not knowing what the movies should be, trying to copy Marvel, but then kind of doing it in their own way, but rushing certain things, then also kind of just copying them with, the idea of like getting the team together, doing a Justice League, doing it too soon, and just all the stuff that's happened with DC, even in the last, let's just say 10 years. In the last 10 years, they've just had a really bad grasp of things. And I think WB Games, I think generally, again, they've had, because you have to think outside of DC, right? They've had the Middle Earths of the world, and obviously they just crushed it with Hogwarts Legacy. Like, it's more than just DC. That's why for this video, I just wanted to focus on DC. The DC side of things, the people that are supposed to like kind of craft out like a 10-year plan and, okay, well, here's what we can do and here's who we can talk to. They need to wake up. And I think that, again, like, I'm almost talking past tense because that kind of stuff, I pray, I really do. I pray and hope is done. I hope that all of this talk of, just relying on a couple different teams and being unwilling to talk to anybody else, I hope that was the WB Games of like 2 years ago. Now, the issue here, to kind of end the story, to wrap the video up, the sad part is, even if you started this, even if this is actually taking place, which again, if it's not, people need to be let go. People need to be swapped in and out because it's ridiculous, right? But even if things are happening, it just happened. It just happened in the last year, maybe year and a half, if you want to, give them a little bit of time. But the sad thing is, with how game development works, that means it's at the very earliest stages of anything. However, I'd like to say this, though. What we're seeing with Star Wars, what we're seeing with Marvel, and even like, EA specifically has been doing this, right? When you have like the Iron Mans of the world that announce themselves, Iron Man just started. Like, they did Dead Space. It's more than one team, at Motive, but they just started working on Iron Man like 6 to 8, maybe like a year ago max, okay? And we got the announcement really not all that long ago, okay? From the time they announced it to the time that they got it, really it was under a year. And we just got the Black Panther thing, which was rumored a little while ago, but same thing. That game most likely has not been in the works for ages and ages. So I guess what I'm saying is, on one side of things, I don't like that. I've actually expressed that in videos where, as I get older, maybe when games get announced 5 years before, like when they just get the license to it and they say, yeah, we're working on it. Like, we just started yesterday. We got maybe like 5-6 years left. Give us some time, but we want to tell you we're working on it. As I get older, I hate that, just because you don't know what's going to happen in 5 years. Like I don't really feel the need to get excited for something that's 5-6 years ahead of my life, because I just don't know what's going to happen, in that amount of time. Plus, it's just a lot of waiting. Okay. So on one side of things, I hate that. On the other side of things, there's some leeway for DC to say, well, look, even if they just started this under James Gunn, say like in the last year, well, you can look at what the competition is doing, and they are doing that. They are saying, okay, well, we just got this. We just started this Star Wars game. We just started this Marvel game, but we're going to announce it because that's the way the industry is. So on one side of things, I actually almost get worried the longer that nothing happens from WB Games. And again, it's not because this can be misconstrued, I think, online with the idea that, well, you're rushing. Oh, you just want the game tomorrow. No, I never said that, right? Now, again, am I pleased with announcing it and then it comes out 5 years later? Not really, but it's the way it is. But my point is, well, I'm not asking for the game tomorrow, but we're seeing similar examples of, if there is a studio of James Gunn or whoever, right? You probably have to go more like the executives of WB Games. If they made a deal with X studio to make a Aquaman game, okay? They should probably, even though it's 5 years out, even though they gave them it and they started 6 months ago, they're literally just crafting the basic idea of the game. On one side of things, I don't really want them to announce it, but I actually think it's very necessary, because you got to start getting it moving. Suicide Squad's coming. Wonder Woman's coming. The second WB Montreal game is actually probably pretty close. Like, it's not all that far out. But what comes? Injustice 3, that's really one of the only ones. The other WB Montreal game, then you're out. Then you're done. Unless Traveler's Tale or TT Games, are they doing a DC game? I mean, you run out of studios rather quickly because you just don't have, and that's okay. They don't have all that many, that's fine. So what they need to do is start saying, hey, we just worked on a deal. There's a team working on a Green Lantern game. It's 5 years away, but because it's probably going to be a similar thing as like the movie situation, where you have a huge gap, right? You have the transition between old DC and new DC, where there's like a year, 2 years, where there's literally nothing, because they're literally kind of restarting, and you can't craft things that fast. It'll probably, I imagine, be that way for gaming. You'll have the Wonder Womans, the Suicide Squads, maybe the second WB Montreal game will help like bridge a gap. But then you should start like 2, 3, 4 years from now. There should be some of these third-party deals, these agreements from other teams. They should start happening. These games should start coming out. There should be a Superman game, even if it's not made from you, if it's made from somebody else. That game should come out in the next. And we talked about a news story James Gunn kind of almost teased. Like, I do think a Superman game comes out in the next 5 years. So there should be more, a lot more. And again, good end of the story, whatever. I think that is where they're going. So hopefully this was fun. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. My throat's getting a little tired right now, so I'm going to wrap it up. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know if you, again, like these longer kind of sit-down videos. There's not endless amounts of topics for this, but there are enough I could constantly do them if you wanted me to. But no, let me know what you think. Make sure you're subscribed, bell icon turned on. Check out any of my other links in the description for my other YouTube channels, our Twitter, our Discord. All that stuff is in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you all on the next one.